welcome to the World Puja Network. This is Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I would like to thank the people at World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks. And today I'm joined by Dr. Ted Loder, who is the science advisor for the Orion Project.org.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Ted. How are you?
Just doing fine, thank you.
Good. So we're going to bring you up to date on what's been going on with the Orion Project, and we're going to discuss the sort of things that have to happen in our society and actually have energy solutions become a reality so that we really can transform the civilization to something that is sustainable. So those will be the things we'll be talking about today. And Ted, I'd like to, if you could, just sort of give folks an overview of some of the things that we're working on right now and what's happening, for example, with the Stan Meyer water-to-fuel system and where we are with all of that. And
oh, sure. I might as well. Thank you, Steve. I'll start at that point. Then we've had a lot of activity in the proper direction with the Stan Meyer technology. We're working with the people that have the remnants of his technology, and we're tentatively putting together a team of our own scientists plus some scientists who worked and engineers who worked with Stan over the years. We're putting together a team to go out and visit the material, if you will, and assess it, do a preliminary documentation on what is there and what isn't there, and so we can decide how to go forward with the acquisition of the technology. What has happened over the last 6 months or so since we first got in contact with the people who own the technology right now, which was last January, a year plus ago. But within the last 6 months or so, as it became known that we were trying to negotiate for this technology, is that several people who worked with Stan Meyer have come to us offering to help us with their sort of bona fides and what they had done with Stan, and also with some information that it was their tentative assessment that perhaps some of the technology was no longer available as part of that technology set or data set, if you will, or the technology materials. So what we've done is we've asked some of these people to come help us assess it, since they worked with Stan, worked on the technology. A fellow who worked on his water car, for example, who was one of the engineers working on it. Mechanics and engineers working on it will be working with us, as well as several other people who worked extensively with Stan on various projects. He had many projects. It wasn't just it was various aspects of breaking apart water and to make it breaking water into hydrogen and oxygen gases, or hydroxy gas, Brown's gas. And so he used different embodiments of that technology in different products that he was working on. And as it turns out, that various members of his team worked on various different aspects of the technology. So we have a group of us going to be visiting that sometime within the next month, if all goes well, to do the final assessment on that, and then move ahead, or find out that most of the very important materials are missing, and that'll be of interest as well. So it's an ongoing saga, but we are moving forward with it, and we're actually quite excited about it.
Well, I think it's really exciting. For example, two people who did work with him on the electronics, which is where the magic is in this technology, is in the ability at very low power input to create a type of electromagnetic signal that breaks water apart into hydrogen and oxygen to run a motor. And that two of these people have surfaced who worked directly with Stan Meyer with those devices and with the electronics. So what our hope is that they'll be able to go in there with Dr. Loder and another member of our team, Bill Costantino, and they'll be able to say, well, look, this should be there, or this is there, and this is where the real action is, and this is what it's doing, because they had been there firsthand. Hopefully they'll be able to give us a really good assessment, because this is the determining visit to see whether or not we're going to proceed with the acquisition of all this equipment and actually the car itself, which ran on water, and quite a few other things. And this is going to be a big story either way, as I've mentioned before, because if the technology has been tampered with and it turns out that after his death it was, quote, sanitized, this is a very important thing to note, because after all, we do know it did work. A lot of people had this in question. We've had one of our Disclosure Project witnesses, who's an aerospace engineer, Dr. Paul Sitz, had told us that he had met one of the scientists who was sent over from Britain to test this along with an admiral, and that in fact it did work. There was no tricks to it. Some people wondered if there were hidden fuel cells in the car that made it run, and there weren't. It ran really off the water, and there were other devices that he was working on, and that if in fact these things have been somehow changed or stolen, some of the components, because there is some concern from one person who went out there to look at these things that his papers are not there that you would expect to be there. And so we're going to have either a story here where it's another case of some shadowy group suppressing this information under his mysterious death, at the time of his mysterious death, or in fact that it's mostly intact, in which case we're going to need a lot of support to acquire the material. It's about $120,000 is the cost of acquiring all this material and equipment and technology, and then we'll have to have a place to begin to do the experimental work, which is going to be, I would say, at least 3 to 6 months of people studying what's there and beginning to reproduce it and get it to actually operate, because you're dealing with highly explosive gas with the Brown's gas, and we have to have special equipment and facility to do that. But this is the first step to us making the decision whether to go or no go, as they say in space flight, on this particular technology. And that is, now that it'll be a team of 6 people who will be going there, three of whom actually worked very directly with Stan Meyer on the equipment. So this is quite exciting, because the implications of it are rather huge. The world is covered mostly with water, as everyone knows, and there's plenty of wastewater that comes out of every house. And if you can run a generator or run a car on water instead of carbon-based fossil fuels, you have an enormous breakthrough in energy generation and quite a revolution in how we live on this planet. So this is something we're pursuing, have been. All of you have been hearing about this over the past 6 to 12 months, and it's sort of coming to a head. So what now is planned early June is to go out there with this team and really do a thorough assessment of it. So that's one thing that your generous contributions are helping towards, is so we can put this team together and get them all out to where this is being stored at a undisclosed but secure location, and see what is what with this technology, and if we're really going to go forward with it. So hopefully sometime in June we'll be able to give you an update on that.
Well, I hope so, and hopefully by probably mid-June we should be able to give you the update at the mid-June World Puja conversations. Another group we're working with that we've mentioned in the past is a Canadian fellow, Thane Hines, and we continue to work with him. It's nice, actually. I'll give him some major credit in working with him. We've supported him at a modest level to just build something and keep his research going. And he's working with a magnetic motor generator that is approaching the point where it will run itself. And that's what we're asking him to help us do, or we're helping him do it, whichever way it works, both ways. And his progress has been substantial and significant over the past few months since we met with him in the early or late winter period of January, early February period. So it's a pleasure actually working with somebody. He's at a University of Ottawa. He works with people there at the university. Professor at one of the departments helps make things happen for him there. He's a researcher working there. He's not a faculty member. But he's very open about what he's doing and very honest about what he's doing, and we're very excited about it as he's designing various coils that are reaching a point where, last we spoke with him just a few days ago, he has some coils that are producing, each individual coil produces between 35 watts per coil, and he plans to put nearly a dozen, 10 to 11, in a circle on these, producing 11 times 300 plus watts, and it takes 200 plus watts, 200 some watts to run the system. So if all goes well, it should be putting out more than it takes to run the system, but as always, it takes actually the final build and the final testing to determine if that's indeed the case, and there unknown glitches. So it's a very promising, the curves, the direction of the curves, more power out, less power in, are all going in the right direction. And so we hope within a few weeks to a month or so, we should be hearing some good news from him as well.
Yeah, we know inventors over the years have successfully done this a number of times with with magnets and special coil configurations, and apparently the geometry is quite important here in terms of how they're aligned in order to increase the flow of the ambient or the environmental electromagnetic field so that you actually get what's called an over-unity effect, where you're getting more energy out than in. And this is, of course, what we're after. This is the holy grail of new energy, would be to have a system that is not only very efficient but self-running and putting out usable power, even if initially, experimentally, it's a few watts. So that's what we're shooting for with this system, and we're hoping that we'll get some answers here in the coming weeks as he goes into the final phase. And there have been historically a number of such inventions that have been made, and typically they get seized or suppressed. We're involved with this, so that won't happen, and we're trying to keep this on track. And so this is another thing that your contributions and support at the Orion Project .org will help with, and we're going to hope that he comes through with something that will be exciting. Once he gets his final result, we're going to then, of course, have several independent laboratories test it to confirm, as well as a number of scientists on our team that are independent to confirm the result. And it would also have to go through independent reproducibility before you could really say eureka. But this is one of the things. This is how experimentation goes forward, and we're doing it on a modest budget, but we're proceeding, and we're hoping that he really gets the breakthrough that we're looking for here soon.
Well, one of the comments I think it's important to realize, of the listeners of the World Fusion Network, as well as the supporters of the Orion Project, the orionproject.org, on the web, one of the important things that we're trying to do is work with multiple inventors, or engineers, designers, scientists around the country to be able to provide some seed money for ideas that they have or prototype development. And it's not a lot, but we've tried to put money in various places so that you plant a lot of seeds and some don't come up and some grow like crazy. And so we're sort of trying to spread the support around in hopes that, in a variety of technologies actually, in the hopes that at least one or more than one, of course, will come forward. That's why we're working with the Stan Meyer stuff, with the water to fuel technology, or that whole realm of technology, and then we're working with Thane with magnetic motors. We're working with another physicist in the U.S. Working on a technology that it extracts energy from the Earth's magnetic field, variations in that. So that's another type of technology we're supporting. That continues to go well. And
yeah, that's actually the electromagnetic field. And people, everyone knows that there's at any given moment there are enough lightning strikes in the world to run the world very easily off the electricity. And the question is, what is the electromagnetic potential that's around the Earth? The Earth is actually a big electromagnetic generator spinning through space, and there's a lot of good reference materials for that. And the question is there a way to create through a sort of collector system, an antenna-type system? And there's a lot of evidence this is precisely what Tesla had at one point, that was running a car, charging the batteries on a car, that would collect enough energy so that the energy flow rate into the system would get up into the kilowatt range, at least as a prototype. And that's what we're working on, and there have been some breakthroughs on that in the last couple of weeks, where some specialized antennas, one of which has about 10 miles of fine wire inside the antenna that are coiled, are actually just passively picking up voltage and electricity, and it's going to go through a series of amplification systems and condenser systems that will then multiply that effect, and so that the antenna is going to sort of be directing or focusing the energy flow into the device, which will then multiply the effect, and then it'll be go through standard rectification and then storage into batteries like you would a solar system, and then the solar through an inverter system to run regular household appliances. So that's what we're actually funding. We have set up a facility and have a experimental team working on this full time out west and here in the United States, and the physicist and his team are making some big strides here in the last few weeks, and that's something that also we need a lot of support on financially, and at the Orion Project.org you can see what we're doing with that and other projects and make a contribution, because that's how we're supporting all these guys. And it's the only shot we have at really having a new energy future. I looked into, I don't know if you know this, Ted, I looked into having my house go solar, and the bill for it was around $200,000.
Oh, my gosh. I know it's high.
My wife and I looked into this seriously, and to really cover, I'm talking getting rid of the oil heat. We live out back east here where it can get down to zero here in the mountains of Virginia in the winter sometimes. We had the heaters on yesterday, the oil heaters on yesterday. In the summer it can be 95 to 100 and humid, so you have your air conditioning. To really take care of the energy needs of this house with solar panels and all the batteries and all the rectifiers and all the modifications to the systems was going to come to around $200,000. Now, listeners, I want you to know that, this is something I'm not going to do. I can't afford to do that. So the bottom line is most people, I guess if you're Donald Trump or if you're the vice president of Morgan Stanley, who's getting trillions of dollars in bailouts from the taxpayers, you could probably do it. But I can't do it. And the average homeowner can't do it. And, you see a lot of people who say, well, you can do it for $25,000 to $50,000, but they're not talking about really running all the needs of their house on just their solar. There's a lot of things that are being left out of that they're still supplying fossil fuel for, say the heating system, for example, if it's oil or propane or gas or what have you. So if you're really going to go carbon zero and do this, you're talking big bucks. And what we're trying to do is come up with a viable system from these various inventors that says to the world, look, here's the direction our society can go, and the $86 billion in stimulus money that the Obama administration is putting into alternative energy and for the new energy economy, just a little bit of it needs to go into these things.
Well, that's so true, and right now the present options for going off the grid or becoming self-sufficient in energy technologies unless you're in the southwest where you got lots and lots and lots of solar and what have you, are very expensive actually, in spite of tax rebates and what have you. For the average homeowner, the payback period is on the order of a decade or so in many cases, and most average homeowners can't upfront that amount of money right off the get-go.
Right.
One of the other things that we are also supporting several other scientists and inventors and some technologies which at this point, because they've asked us to be quiet about that, we can't really say anything more right now, although we hope within, and particularly with some of them, sometime within the next several months, we may be able to make some announcements of some breakthroughs there as well. So we've mentioned some that we've talked about in the past, but there's some others that we're helping support at a modest level, and we have our hopes that one or two of them will come through as well. So we're working at it.
We're working at it, yeah, and I want to emphasize that Dr. Bravo and Dr. Loder and myself and everyone on the team are doing this without any pay. None of us get any of the contributions that are made. 100% of the contributions to the orionproject.org go to the actual research being done. And the reason we're doing it in this fashion that Ted has been describing is because, as you know, a year ago our goal was to open a research facility here near the University of Virginia, and to do that we needed at least $3.1 million. We never raised that sum, although we're grateful for the sums that have been donated, and I hope they keep coming in so we can support these folks. What we decided to do is go into a sort of grant-making mode, where at least the money just isn't sitting at the Bank of America getting 0.001% interest and not doing any good. So we decided it was such a strategic decision by the board, and to let's see if there's some folks out there who on their own can come up with a solution even without the sort of synergy that a real research center would bring. Obviously, the best way to do this would be to have adequate funding so that you could bring all these folks together under one roof with the proper equipment and project management and some synergy, and really properly funded, come out with some breakthroughs. But since that hasn't happened, we have felt that it's important that we not just collect the money to sit there, but that we begin putting it to work, and we have put it to work by spreading it around. And it's a little bit like a guy I know who used to do venture capital. He said, well, I'd put money into 10 things, 9 of them wouldn't work out, but the one that did would be wonderful. And we only need one of these to really work out well in order for us to have a big breakthrough in energy generation, so our civilization can have a real break with the current paradigm, which is a central grid that's going to collapse sooner or later, and it's in the process of, the electric grid, as you all know, is very vulnerable, and one that is reliant, at least in the United States, more than 50% of our electricity comes from coal. And, of course, never mind all of our cars and trucks and what have you. And, by the way, I want to point out that an electric vehicle, since most of us get the majority of our electricity from coal-fired power plants, they've done a study. An electric car plugged into a coal-fired grid, you're better off buying a Prius. Why? Because you're charging that car off the worst kind of energy generation that does the worst kind of pollution that there is, and that's coal-fired power plants, which even if they become cleaner, you're blowing up all of Appalachia to get to the stuff with mountaintop removal. So there's this whole sort of hoodwinking of the public on this. They think, oh, gee, I'm so green, I have an electric car. Well, unless you're on hydroelectric power in Quebec or something, you're not so green. You're actually better off just going ahead and buying the new Ford Fusion or the Prius, which is what we have, one of the new Priuses, which is nice. It gets 45, 50 miles per gallon, and it's certainly better than a Chevy Suburban on fuel mileage. But we need to make a total paradigm shift to this new type of system, which is the stuff that we know has existed since the early part of the 1900s, and that is energy from the electromagnetic field around us. That had been done as early as 1902 with the Tesla Stubblefield experiment with the Earth battery. And actually, Ted and I saw a version of that once, although the guy never wanted to reproduce it. But we actually saw several hundred watts of power running appliances being generated out of a type of generator that had nothing but stakes plugged into the ground. And that was collecting this energy. So these are the sort of projects we're trying to formalize now with some of these inventors. And if we have this type of capability, then it's a big breakthrough for our society. And, of course, that's going to take a lot of courage by the public to support it, and by our leaders. We're hoping we have some leadership in Washington today with the new administration. At least they're not blatantly oil people, even if their energy advisors have been really off the mark on what they've been doing, in my opinion. But at least there seem to be highly intelligent people who aren't owned by ExxonMobil or Halliburton. So that's a step in the right direction.
Definitely. So that sort of essentially sums up what we're doing right now and whom we're supporting, at least in the areas we can tell you about at this point. And we continue to be very optimistic that at least one or several of the groups that we're working with will be coming forth with technology that we can announce to the world after due diligence and thorough multiple testing at multiple different laboratories or universities. So this brings us perhaps the second half of this World Puja discussion here. This brings us to talking about the maturity of society and how it affects the technologies that we're speaking about. Steve?
Well, I think the real issue is how society is held back by the type of technologies it's allowed to have. There's a member of Congress who ran for president last year who has a friend that we've spoken with who used to work for the Department of Energy. And this person was shown a facility near the Oak Ridge National Laboratories that was filled with these type of new energy inventions, exactly the kinds of things we're working on now and trying to fund with our few $1,000s, very modest amounts of money that we've been able to raise. And it was just filled with it. And Ted, you and I have visited the laboratory of a man who worked in these classified projects in the 60s, but who was taken to a facility in Wisconsin where it was just chock full of things that had been confiscated. And so the question, I think the real question, I'm going to turn this issue on its head, and that is that our society has been retarded, and I'm using this word advisedly, stunted. Failure to thrive would be a good medical analogy if it were a child. Starved. Because these technologies have been deliberate and with malice aforethought, out of sheer lust for power and greed, been withheld from the people of the world. And this is a really astonishing scandal that, interestingly, you don't hear about that in Time and Newsweek and the Washington Post and the New York Times. I mean, you'll hear about Elliot Spitzer having an affair with a prostitute or something earth-shattering like that. Newsflash, powerful men have affairs. Good grief. I always laughed when during the Monica Lewinsky thing was happening. I'm going, this is news to people. But get over it. The truth, if you get me unplugged here on this, I'll really go on a tear in a minute about how idiotic the mainstream media has become. But here you have a situation where we can prove in a court of law that there has been a multi-$100 trillion rip-off of the American people and of the world by withholding these technologies, forcing them to stay on coal and fossil fuels and oil for a century that we haven't needed to. And so what really is the problem is that I think from Joe Sixpack with his gun rack in his pickup truck driving an F-150 getting 15 miles per gallon to people who are driving around in Priuses wanting to pat themselves on the back feeling like they've been environmental and they're doing the right thing. I think that almost everyone on the planet now would love to have free energy, for one thing, that doesn't cost what it does today. And number two, stop destroying and cannibalizing this beautiful earth by blowing up the mountains to get at the coal and digging out the oil and spewing it into the air. The problem is that there has been a machine. I like the name of the group, Rage Against the Machine, for this reason. A sort of big financial and industrial machine that has seen that these technologies don't see the light of day. And often they have been suppressed under the ruse of national security. Of course, this is the thing everything gets wrapped in when they want to really pull out the big guns for some absurd and nasty reason, such as invading a country like Iraq. But in truth, these technologies have been kept secret because out of sheer lust for power. Because if you and I all have a source of energy coming out of the electromagnetic field that's free for the taking around us, well, you know what? The multi-trillion-dollar business known as oil and gas and coal is no longer needed. And goodbye and good riddance and rest in peace. It's been way too long that we've stayed addicted to this nasty stuff. But what I see is that our civilization has been withheld from being able to advance. And what do I mean by that? Well, if Americans will look around them outside of their own little comfortable homes and cars, you'll see a world that's about 80% in poverty. You know, there are 2 billion people a year, 2 billion people on the earth every day who don't have potable drinking water. Half the world's population lives on a couple dollars a day in terrible poverty. A significant part of the world's population does not have electrification or reliable electrification for cooling or for refrigeration or even the most mundane tasks. And so we live in a world where on the one hand we have Silicon Valley and fiber optics and integrated circuits and computers all running on coal-fired power plants, I might add, from the 1800s. And the rest of the world is here in this dreadful state of poverty, and there's no way of changing that paradigm. In fact, I was even reading in one of the policy wonk journals that I read before going to bed, because my tendency is to read the New Republic or something like that as I'm falling asleep. But it was talking about how the economic downturn has really hit the rest of the world much harder than the United States because they're much more vulnerable, and that some people have been clucking, well, that's a good thing because it maintains America's supremacy, relatively speaking. So it's this whole zero-sum mentality game that's rather sick, I think, that requires such enormous poverty in the world. And these technologies would eliminate that. Imagine every village in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, or in Asia or India, be able to have clean and free electricity coming from the zero-point energy or the quantum vacuum magnetic field, flux field that's around them and that's just right there in their village, so that they don't have to spend trillions of dollars in India for conventional power plants or solar, which is extremely expensive to install and distribute. You would have a civilization that would blossom, and what we have now is a civilization that's a clash of civilizations, of haves and have-nots, which does not redound to a good future. All it does is build into the possibility of increasing conflict in the world because of the resentment that builds up between the people who have done well and taken the resources of the earth, as those of us in the West have, and Japan and other countries, while the rest of the world is in a dreadful state. So if one's going to look at this situation compassionately, and I think it's the only way to look at it, is that we have a world that is really being starved because of the way the technologies have been withheld, and we are in a state of tremendous immaturity as a civilization because of it. And it isn't just in terms of environmental pollution. It's in terms of economic opportunities. It's in terms of educational opportunities. It's in terms of the mind-numbing poverty that we see around the world. And I don't see how that's going to change, frankly, when in order for it to change, we would just be expanding more and more billions of people driving around in the Tata car in India, all using gasoline. So this is the big problem. And how do we advance as a civilization without a major breakthrough in the fundamental way we generate energy, which really democratizes prosperity, that doesn't leave the world in the situation we find today, where there are 200 or 300 corporations and families that have over half of the world's net worth concentrated in a handful of people's hands. And I think this is something that is really an existential threat to humanity and to the earth. And the stunting of our civilization by the withholding of these technologies is really got to change. And this is what the Orion Project is at the heart about doing. This is what we're really about doing. This is what gets me up to continue working on this, even with the setbacks and the aggravations that we face every day. So I think that, and without pay or compensation, and often being pilloried and attacked by other people out there. The thing that keeps me going, frankly, is knowing that this is going to be the way that we go from a stunted and, frankly, with retarded civilization, which is what we have today, that's been artificially stunted, to one that's really going to blossom into a beautiful civilization of abundance and prosperity and sustainability, where we're living on the earth and with the earth in a state of homeostasis, in a state of peaceful coexistence, so we're not doing this brutal cannibalization of the Earth's resources in order for us to eke out an existence here. The other thing is that I think that if you look at our civilization, we're not a sustainable civilization. Nothing we are doing is sustainable. Whether it's how we're paving over, increasing areas of arable land for highways, to the use of fossil fuels for transportation, to how we're heating and cooling our homes. And everyone knows that, but no one seems to really want to take a hard look at a radical departure from this sort of incrementalism of, say, wind and solar, which is going to be too little, too late, and frankly is also way too expensive. I really honestly don't see, how, if I have to spend $200,000 to retrofit my house properly, how that is a economically viable solution for the masses of the people in the world. It's ridiculous, frankly.
Yeah, so it's interesting because in that model, actually the production of all those solar panels and everything else has an environmental impact cost as well.
Of course. Well, that's true. And I think that's the other thing one has to look at is manufacturing. Once we get these sort of technologies out, the price of manufacturing goes down radically, because so much of the cost of manufacturing and getting a product to market is the shipping, and it's all fossil fuel based. All the energy that goes into the manufacturing, all the mining, all the transportation. If you look at farming, farming is a very petroleum-intense industry. Why? The tractors, everything that's being used is burning fossil fuels, processing, et cetera, and so on. So all of this would be changed for the good if we had a new energy system. And I think this is where the leadership steps in. This is where the public has got to get educated about, and this is a key part of what the OrionProject.org is doing, is educating people and also our leaders. And this is why you can go to the OrionProject.org and you can send a letter that we have written, or you can make it in your own words, to President Obama and to your members of Congress, your 2 senators and your representative, asking them to take a look at these types of real energy solutions which have been passed over in this $86 billion stimulus part of the budget that's for energy. It's completely been left out. And there's not one red cent going into this area. The only people who are really providing significant funding in this area are those of us at the orionproject.org. And it isn't because it can't be scientifically established that these technologies have validity. We have plenty of scientific evidence that they have validity. It's the question of whether do we want to go in that direction, and that's going to take some courageous leadership from the White House, from the President, and from Congress, and also from the people saying, okay, we've learned about this. We're not going to be happy with, 2% of our electricity coming from solar or wind, or something like this. We're gonna really demand that there be a major change in energy policy and how we're living. And not only do we need to do that for national security and environmental reasons in the United States, but we need to do it for compassion reasons for the poor of the world, which is the majority of the world's population, who go to bed hungry and go to bed without, heat or cooling or even potable water. And this is a situation which is scandalous. And I might also say that the degradation in the Earth's environment is escalating exponentially every year. We're at the point now where in the summer there's virtually no northern polar ice cap, which of course is a huge problem because all of the sunlight coming in, instead of being reflected off the snow and ice, which helps cool the Earth, it just gets absorbed into the water, which heats the Earth. So this is a big part of the engine driving global warming, as you all know. And I think that none of these things can be changed at the pace that with the strategies that are being entertained currently in Washington or in our universities. They're all moribund, too little, too late. And this is why people need to really step up, and we need to find some networking help here, too. I might add the people listening to the World Puja Network, because someone listening may know a philanthropist or someone who has the ability to make a substantial contribution to the energy field, who could provide a few $1 million in seed money so we could really do what we intended to do, and that is open a facility that's properly run with the world's brightest engineers and physicists all working together on these solutions and on bringing out these solutions. We're certainly going to need that kind of facility for this Stan Meyer equipment if we acquire it here in the coming month or so. So I think that we're going to need to do that. But we also need to continue. I think something like 5,000 or 6,000 people have sent faxes to the President and to members of Congress from our website, and that's something that we're sponsoring. It costs us a little bit, but it's worth it, so that they hear from you. I mean, we do live, allegedly, in a democracy. We did elect a new president a few months ago. He's been in office now for over 100 days, and I think that it's very important that he hear from you, and I know that from being in Washington a lot, that when there's a groundswell of movement of people getting interested in an issue, it does get on his radar screen. So take a few minutes and go to the orionproject.org and send the President a letter asking him to please look at our energy briefing, which is there and which all of you can download as a PDF file and print out and give to your members of Congress or to other people in your community, and educate them on what we're doing. Maybe even host something in your living room in your local town, a little town hall meeting to educate them on these issues so that we get the kind of groundswell of support. This is what it's all about, is the grassroots and the net roots, as they call it, and we really need your help in doing that.
I wanted to add a comment. This is so true. We do need to help, and this comes under the level or the category of courageous citizenship. In other words, taking citizenship in this country seriously and doing what you can do to help change the direction of things. I wanted to add a comment here about where things might go. We talk about free energy right now and everything else. In reality, and it should be made clear here, that what we're talking about is that the source of energy is free. For example, if you build a coal-fired power plant, you have to pay for the building of it, and then you have to pay for the product that comes into it that you get the energy from, i.e. the coal. So that's not free energy, but you do have to pay for the building of the plant. in this free energy movement, if you want to call it that in the broadest sense, it's going to cost something. The research is costing something, and ultimately the development of the device that creates or provides the, quote, free energy is going to cost some money, and this has the potential of just dramatically changing the direction of our industrial base, even our industrial cities like Detroit, if they were involved in manufacturing of devices. This is a multi-billion, multi-hundred billion, probably trillion-dollar industry over the years to produce devices. So it costs money to produce them, but the source of the energy, i.e. the coal, if you will, or the nuclear materials, are free because you're extracting energy from whatever particular source, whether it's the Earth's field or whether it's the quantum vacuum state or whatever. So this is an important distinction and understanding to make. Now, in terms of there's certainly an economy of scale in terms of the third world and providing energy technologies for people in other parts of the world. One of Orion Project's goals is ultimately to be able to make these technologies available to the third world and perhaps even the second world to be able to lift them up in terms of their energy needs. Because the source of the energy is now free if they can have a device in their village or whatever else that produces power. Once they have it, it just works for them. This is a major step in lifting them up. They can use the water the energy to pump water, so they aren't carrying water from wells miles and miles on their backs or heads, whatever else. This is a major change in lifestyle and potential. And it's one of the things we foresee happening as this develops.
That's right. We have a sister corporation, Aero, Advanced Energy Research Organization, that would take these technologies and try to get them get them properly funded and into manufacturing. But the Orion Project.org would be the entity that would make a gift of these technologies to areas around the world where the greatest need exists. For example, you can map it you can actually look at their websites where you can look at the deforestation of the rainforest and where the encroachment into the rainforest is really having the largest environmental impact, because the rainforests not only provide a lot of oxygen, but they also take in a lot of CO2 and are a big part of the biosphere equilibrium. And so there are areas where the slashing and burning of that, much of it is for subsistence, existence, and farming, and just the trees are cut down to make coal so people can cook their food. Having these technologies, now these are very poor areas, of course, and even if the device costs $5,000 or $10,000, well, the average person in America could afford that, so that their home would have no electric bill. It would be an economic slam dunk and make complete sense. But if you're going to a very poor area in Africa or the Amazon or any number of areas around the world, in India, that would be like asking an American for $5 billion. They don't have it, and they're not going to have it. So there's going to need to be this cooperation between these sort of new technology developers and the developing world. And our view is that once we get these breakthroughs going, that the Orion Project would be able to be a entity that would provide these technologies at no cost to the areas that need them the most and where the need is most critical, and where even if they were moderately priced technologies, they wouldn't be able to afford them. And this would enable us to greatly benefit the areas of the world where the worst environmental holocaust is happening, and also where there's the most terrible poverty in the world. And one of the things, in terms of the discussion we were just having, Ted, is I often liken it to hydroelectric power. That's not feasible everywhere, but if you look at a hydroelectric dam, I'll just remind everyone what that is. If you go to the Hoover Dam, after you build that thing, never mind the environmental impact of it, we won't get to go there, but after you have a dam built, the water going over a gradient falling down because of gravity turns a turbine and generates electricity. So once the dam is built, except for some maintenance, the electricity is generated for free. And this is why when I went up to Montreal, into a ski area outside Montreal where it's bitter cold, and I was looking at some places, and I noticed that they had electric baseboard heating. Now, in the United States, this would be the most inefficient and expensive way to heat your house. I said, what are these things doing here? And they said, well, we don't use oil or anything. We use electric heat. I said, my God, your heating bill must be $1,000 a month. They say, oh, no, this is Hydro-Quebec, and this is hydroelectric power from waterways, and the electricity here is so cheap that it's cheaper to just heat with electricity, which is non-polluting. We don't use any oil or natural gas at all. And I was amazed. And if you just go down a few miles into the United States, you have none of that. You have oil-fired and natural gas heat in all the homes and complexes down south of the Canadian border. So the reason for that is that they're getting essentially free energy. And where is the energy coming from? I mean, let's get real basic here. It's really coming from gravity. It's a gravity-to-energy system. What? Gravity? Yes, because water falling over a gradient is being pulled down because of this mysterious force known as gravity. And the gravity turns the water, makes the water fall, which turns a turbine, which generates electricity. Voila, it's free energy. So what we're talking about doing is creating electromagnetic devices that pull in the electromagnetic flux field and the zero-point energy field, which has been proven to exist, into an electromagnetic generator, or in the case of the Stan Meyer equipment, creates enough of a electromagnetic buzz within the water to separate the hydrogen and oxygen. It's the same concept where you are getting a whole lot more energy out than you're having to put in. And that's all the hydroelectric plant is. So there's nothing mysterious here. When people say, oh, this isn't possible, it's perpetual motion, they haven't thought through what Hydro-Quebec is doing with their electric power from waterways. Now, not everywhere in the world has the vast amount of water to tap for hydroelectric, and that's why it's not going to be a viable solution. Most of the hydroelectric power out there has already been pretty much utilized. Some more could be done, but again, there's huge environmental impacts with these massive dam projects, as you all know. So the question then becomes, it's really a paradigm issue of, well, here's something we've lived with for, I don't know when the Hoover Dam was built, but we've had dams since the 20s and 30s and 40s, and that's creating electricity with no fossil fuel costs, and once you build the facility, no energy costs going into it, because gravity is actually providing the force, the energy, because water falling downward over a gradient because of gravity. So this is a concept that you can use to explain to people basically what we're attempting to do with these new technologies. So
that's right. And to go one step further backwards, if you will, or forwards, the water that the gravity is acting on is actually transported through the weather systems and the solar input of solar energy, causing evaporation precipitation cycle, the hydrologic cycle, which then in turn gravity takes over to carry the water downhill and create the energy. So in that case, it's interesting because it links back all the way to the sun. And it's a form of solar power, if you will. So
Absolutely.
Is it free? Yes, we don't have to pay for the sun. We just have to know how to extract that energy, and that's what we're talking about here.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, this is one of the points that was made by the inventor team that we're supporting, that we've been asking for your generous support at the OrionProject.org, is that the electromagnetic field around the Earth and the energy flowing to and through the Earth continually from the sun, not just solar, not just during when the sun is up. It's flowing around the Earth 24/7. It never stops. that is what we're tapping into with this research project we're doing at this facility out west with this physicist and his team. And it's been very well mapped, and it's actually been experimentally proven to exist. So what we're looking at is, again, a way of collecting energy that's being given to us for free by the universe, by the cosmic energy, by the solar energy. And solar energy, by the way, is a lot more than just the daylight sunlight you see that is the photovoltaic that you get from solar panels. Basically, what we're trying to develop with this one project is a type of solar panel, if you want to look at it that way, that would work in the dark, because it'd be tapping into this electromagnetic field as the Earth is turning and spinning in space and collecting and generating electromagnetic energy. And this is a well-documented field of energy, and so that's what we're trying to tap into there, just like you're tapping into, in a sense, the flow of water over a gradient going downhill with hydroelectric. So those are the concepts, and imagine you could have such a device at your home and eventually in your car so that you wouldn't need to have any fossil fuel source at all.
That is absolutely correct, and it's one of our goals. And it also we hope that this explanation of this in sort of a simple, with the analogy of the hydroelectric plant, will allow people to kind of think about this when they talk to others about these possibilities, to explain when people say, "Oh, that's impossible." You would say, "Well, let's look at a hydropower plant as an example of this concept," and hopefully that'll make things a little easier for people as you try to explain to friends, relatives, and colleagues about some of the concepts that we've been talking about on this show and other places for a number of years, actually.
So there's a lot of, we have excuse me, a man who has worked for years in this area since he was in college, and that we've been trying to get liberated from the classified project he's assigned to. This is referenced in the letter that we have written that's on the website at the orionproject.org. And he had a very interesting term for this, WSFM, Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. But it really isn't. I mean, it's really the understanding that there is energy embedded in the space all around us, and that all of matter is a form of energy, but there is an energy field that supports space-time, and then there are the energy fields that are around the Earth that are flowing from not just the sun, but from cosmic radiation that's passing through and around the Earth all the time. And so the idea here is to go into some really advanced concepts of energy collection and then energy generation and supply that goes past the 1800s, 1880s era sort of paradigm of you got to burn something to get energy. This is something that we should have left behind in the early 20th century, and now we're in the early 21st century, and we're paying the cost for the kind of corruption and greed that has kept these technologies away from the world. And the OrionProject.org is trying to do our part to fix this problem, and I thank everyone who has provided support and funding and networking, and please tell your friends and colleagues and neighbors about this show and about the OrionProject.org, and let them know that we're working on some real solutions to these very large problems our society faces. I think we're about out of time, and I would like to thank Dr. Loder for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Steve, for the opportunity. Always fun to talk about this, and hopefully help people understand what we're trying to do, help them understand a little bit better. So
right, and I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us. They've just been wonderful and very supportive. And my name is Dr. Stephen Greer, and this has been Conversations with Dr. Greer at the World Puja Network. We'll see you again soon. And until then, thank you all for your support and help. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.